So during this quarantine, a lot of people are looking for ways to spend their time while they're away from work. Personally, when I have time off, I think the best thing to do is to enjoy a good horror movie and enjoy a good drink. Toward that end, I'm going to share 13 horror movie drink pairings that I think go particularly well together. Now, these are not necessarily my favorite horror movies, although some of them are, and they're not necessarily my favorite drinks, although some of them are. Rather, they're ones that complement each other well. With that in mind, let's get right to it. The first film I've chosen is one I assume most of you have seen, The Shining, based on Stephen King's novel. This is a story of isolation and cabin fever, which seems particularly timely. It's also, ironically, a story, particularly in the novel, about alcoholism. We're not going to get into that, and we're also not going to get into why Stephen King doesn't like the film adaptation, but I will be talking about those in a future video, so click the subscription button if you'd like to stay tuned. In the meantime, I think a perfectly good and obvious choice of a drink pairing is rum. In the book and in the movie, the child Danny Torrance uses the word red rum. So in fact, if you want red rum, you could add some red food coloring to your rum and make a themed drink. Now, red rum is murder spelled backwards, and that plays a role in the film. But for us, rum is just a good choice to pair with the movie. The one I've chosen is the Kraken Black Spiced Rum. Now, I'm not ordinarily a rum drinker, so I find this to be a palatable choice as a standalone, even for those of us who aren't a big fan of rum. This one is also affordably priced and has a bit of a personal connection for me because at some point, for reasons I'll not go into here, I managed to earn the nickname the Kraken from some of my friends. I don't have a copy to show off of my second choice because at some point my DVD went astray, but I think a good second choice is Silence of the Lambs, starring Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter, the serial killer who is in the process of helping the FBI apprehend another serial killer, Buffalo Bill. There's a line in that movie in which Dr. Lecter says, "A census taker tried to test me once, and I ate his liver with fava beans and a nice Chianti." So of course, the obvious pairing of choice is Chianti. The one I've chosen I haven't had a chance to taste yet, and that is the 2017 Bellini Chianti Classico. I'm looking forward to sampling this next time I watch the movie. Now, the line in the film is actually a bit of a joke, because Dr. Lecter, as a psychiatrist, would understand that if he were taking his psychiatric medicine, some of the foods he would not be able to eat would in fact be wine, liver, and beans. So when he said, "I ate his liver with fava beans and a nice Chianti," he was making a bit of an inside joke. If you're interested in a recipe for liver with fava beans to pair with your Chianti, let me know in the comments, and perhaps in the future I'll make a video about the recipe. I also don't have a copy to show you of my third film, but it is available on Netflix, and that's The Invitation, a film about a group of friends gathered for a dinner party in which things very slowly start to go wrong. I choose to pair that with a nice Pinot Grigio. I think that this sort of a light white wine complements the elegance of the dinner party while contrasting the slowly building suspense in the film. The particular bottle that I haven't sampled yet. This is the 2019 Country Priola Pinot Grigio. I did try the 2018, and while it's certainly not my favorite bottle, I was pleasantly surprised by how much of a punch this actually packs for a wine that you can get for under $10. My fourth choice is actually not a single film, but a series, and that's Nightmare on Elm Street, the slasher classic about the demon Freddy Krueger who stalks and kills his victims in their sleep. Because he stalks and kills people in their sleep, a perfect drink of choice to pair with this series is absinthe. Now, it's a myth that absinthe has hallucinogenic qualities, but because of those rumors, it seems like a good choice. I have here Absinthe, which is technically not a real absinthe because this is made with southern wormwood rather than real wormwood, which would be found in a genuine absinthe. Nevertheless, this is a good sort of entry-level drink for people who are unfamiliar with absinthe. Whether you choose this or a real absinthe, make sure that you don't just drink it straight. You'll need absinthe spoons, water, and sugar cubes, because the ritual of absinthe is almost as important as the drink itself. My fifth film actually is one of my favorites, and that is The Exorcist, the classic film in which priests try to rescue a young girl who has been possessed by demons. Now, a perfect pairing for a film like this would be sacramental wine or church wine. Unfortunately, most church wines that I've had the mispleasure of tasting are watered down and reminiscent of kosher wine like Manischewitz, disgustingly sweet and frankly not drinkable. I chose Pinot Noir as a good replacement for sacramental wine. It frequently has these berry notes that are reminiscent of sacramental wine while still being drinkable, and overall is one of my favorite reds. The one in particular that I have is the Four Graces, which is this is a 2017 Pinot Noir, and a fairly good bottle. I recommend it. Some of the best horror films aren't even in the English language. If you have a hankering for a Japanese horror film, the perfect pairing is sake. Now, sake is the national beverage of Japan. The word sake actually in Japanese just means alcohol. What we call sake, which is fermented rice wine, would more traditionally be referred to as nihonshu. The one in particular that I have chosen is this Gekkeiken Black and Gold, which is a blended sake. I haven't had the chance to try this one yet, so I can't comment on the bottle, although I can say that sake in general makes a great pairing with the films of Takashi Miike. In particular, the one I'm recommending is Audition, which is based on this novel by Ryo Murakami. I don't want to say too much about the novel or the film, because some movies are just best watched cold. Take my word for it, you won't regret it if you like a really intense horror film. For Pie Day this year, I took a chance and picked up a few bottles of this 2017 pie wine from Bodegas Langa. I didn't know what to expect. It was an inexpensive wine and I'd never tried it before. I was pleasantly surprised. This is actually a very bold and very dry red wine made from Spanish grapes, and it surprised me with its complexity. Because this is a mathematically inspired Spanish wine, I chose to pair this with a mathematically inspired Spanish film, and that is Fermat's Room, a story in which four mathematicians are summoned to a mysterious meeting where they have to solve puzzles to save their lives. It's a bit of a standard thriller plot, but because the characters are mathematicians, it pairs perfectly with this mathematical wine. For my eighth selection, I've actually chosen a double feature. Both of these are films about ancient vampires that come to terrify the living. The first is Stephen King's Salem's Lot, from his novel of the same title, and the second is Dracula. Now, any version of Dracula will do, but the one I've chosen is this 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is, in my opinion, one of the more successful modern adaptations. Now, for vampire films, I think the perfect pairing is port. The thick and syrupy mouthfeel of port goes well for vampiric sorts of stories. Now, the perfect choice would be a ruby port because of its red color. If you don't have that, a tawny like this from Penfolds Club will do just as nicely. Number 9 is John Carpenter's The Fog, a film in which a fog settles over a town, bringing with it vengeful ghosts. Now, make sure that you see John Carpenter's 1980 classic and not the failed 2005 remake of The Fog. To pair with The Fog, I've chosen vodka, but vodka prepared in a very particular way. What you want to do is obtain a dry ice pellet, one per glass, put that in your glass, and then pour your vodka over the top, and that will create a fog in the glass. Now, this can be a little bit dangerous. You want to make sure that the dry ice has completely melted before you drink, because if you touch it to your tongue or to your skin, dry ice is very cold, and that's a dangerous thing to do. The particular vodka that I have chosen is Tito's vodka. I'm not much of a vodka drinker. This is one of the rare ones that I actually could just drink straight. It's a very good vodka and not terribly expensive. Number 10 is Ghost Story, a film in which a group of men gather to tell ghost stories and find out that they are in fact living a ghost story. This is based on the novel by Peter Straub, and though it's a very different film from its source material, which I'll be discussing in a book versus film video later on, I think that both stand alone as wonderful works, even though you shouldn't consider them really related except in title. Now, this is a story about the Chowder Society, a group of wealthier, older gentlemen who gather in elegant sorts of rooms and they tell each other ghost stories. I think the perfect sort of a drink for that situation is brandy. Now, what you usually want is an older brandy, but even a younger brandy, like this from Quint, can get the job done as long as you're careful with which bottles you choose. Number 11 is another personal favorite of mine. That is John Carpenter's The Thing. This is a story about a shape-shifting alien terrorizing the team at the Antarctic Research Station. Imagine that you're isolated in the middle of nowhere, and further imagine that there's a shape-shifting alien after you. You'd probably want a drink, and the drink you might want is whiskey, in particular, Scotch whiskey. Now, technically, to be true to the film, in which whiskey, and particularly Scotch whiskey, plays a subtle but important role, you might want to drink J&B Scotch, but I've chosen instead one of my personal favorites, and that is this Laphroaig tin. As a matter of fact, that's what I'm drinking now, and I'm almost empty, so bear with me for a moment. Now, Laphroaig is not a Scotch for everyone. This is a very smoky, peaty sort of a Scotch. It's an Islay Scotch. If you're new to Scotch, that's probably not what you want, but if you're a seasoned Scotch drinker, you really can't go wrong. This is a pricier choice than most of the ones that I've picked, but well worth the investment. Number 12 is In the Mouth of Madness, another film by John Carpenter, and I think you're starting to get a sense of what I like to watch. Now, I don't have a copy to show you because I lent my copy to a friend a while back, and I still haven't gotten it back yet, which is why I don't lend things to friends very much anymore. Nevertheless, it is an excellent film, and I don't want to spoil it for you by giving too much away. Suffice it to say, it's a sort of Lovecraftian story. It's frequently overlooked, though, and I chose to pair it with another drink that is frequently overlooked, and that is sherry. Both the film and the drink are often neglected, not mentioned as often as they should be, and I consider sherry to be a thinking man's sort of drink, and I consider In the Mouth of Madness to be a thinking man's sort of a horror film. The sherry that I've chosen is this one. This is the Bodegas Diospaco Manzanilla Rita Pita. This is an excellent sherry. You really can't go wrong, although any sherry will do to pair with In the Mouth of Madness. Remember, sherry is not just for cooking. My 13th and final choice is Cabin in the Woods. Now, if you haven't seen this film yet, I'm not going to spoil anything for you. Suffice it to say, this is the kind of movie that you want to watch with a giant bucket of popcorn. As such, it was a little bit difficult for me to think of what to pair with that movie. I finally chose champagne, or sparkling wine. Surprisingly, that pairs really well with popcorn. If you've never tried it, take my word for it. A bottle of champagne, a bucket of popcorn, and Cabin in the Woods will make for a pure fun movie night. Now, before I sign out, here's a bonus idea. If you ever happen to be watching one of those movies about evil hillbillies, take my word for it, the perfect pairing for those films is moonshine. Well, that does it. That's my list of 13 plus a bonus horror film / drink pairings. I hope that gives you some good ideas. In the meantime, glasses up, everyone. Here's to viruses. May they feel pain when exposed to alcohol. Cheers.